afternoon.
Dr. Bustles?
Here.
Mr. Brennan?
Present.
Mayor Rickaman?
Here.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to kick it over to Ms. Benjamin.
We gotta approve the minutes from the last
Now,
meeting.
motion to approve the minutes from August 13, 2024 and September 2024.
So move.
Second.
Now, a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There we go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad we have everybody here present in this meeting. It's been an unusual legislative year this time. And so we definitely had a lot of wins, but a little bit of challenges. So despite that uncertainty, the team was definitely able to get several things done during this legislative session. And so everybody worked really hard to keep the city priorities front and center. And I want to thank everybody for their hard work. So this is a meeting where we're going to recap what happened on the federal side and the state side for you all.
This past fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the past fiscal year. And then talk a little bit about looking ahead as well for both the federal and the state side. So I want to commend Lana for all of her hard work working with the legislators and the committee and the lobbyists and all of the staff. And definitely commend Peyton for all of her hard work, working with the lobbyists, myself, Juana, Ms. Wilson over the past year. And I'm going to let Peyton kind of set the stage for our discussion today about the federal and state updates.
Hello, council. As Ms. Pam said, it was a little unusual of a year at both the federal and state level. So we wanted to set some context before we hand it over to our amazing state and federal teams. So at the federal level, Congress has been operating under continuing resolutions without passing a full new budget. So what that looks like for us is our community project fund request did not move forward as planned. It's not that they weren't going through the process or weren't submitted, just they have not appropriated and decided on those. When the option reopened for the next fiscal year, which Ralph will explain, we resubmitted the same request we initiated last year, and it will remain in the pipeline, and he'll share more details. At the state level, our funding requests also faced some headwinds. This legislator passed a budget without earmarks in order to reduce the state income tax from 6.2% to 6%. While our specific request didn't make it through this year, we were pleased to see our local government fund distribution arrive as expected since repealing ordinance 2021-21 before July 1st, 2025, and that amount is $3.703 million. Looking ahead, while we've had challenges, these outcomes highlight why it's important that we stay engaged and that this committee continue to meet, we keep building relationships, and continue advocating for our priorities as the capital city. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ms. Pam to introduce our first team.
So thanks, Peyton. And with that, we're excited to have Ralph and Deborah give us some updates and some more details about what Peyton has laid out. And then once they're done, we're going to hand it over to Kyle, Michelle, Caroline Delaney, and Damon Jeter to update us on the state side. So Ralph, you ready? We got a presentation too.
Quick question, is the PowerPoint up on the screen?
It will be.
It will be, okay. Okay, thank you, I'm sorry. But it's good to see everybody. It's interesting to see everybody from this angle. I'm just looking straight at you, not down at you, but it's nevertheless good to see you. I think you all know my colleague, Deborah Dehaney Howard. She's joining us, and then I'd also like to, before I get into the presentation, really quickly introduce our new colleague, Kennedy Bailey, who's joining us. She came on board with us at the beginning of June. She graduated from the University of Texas last year. So she's been on board with us for a little over 2 months, and she's been great, and I hope you all get to know her in the coming weeks and months. So,
Where is she, Ralph? Show it. I want to see who she is.
she's being shy.
Hi, it's so nice to meet all of you. I had the chance to meet a couple of you at the Conference of Mayors, which was awesome, but it's nice to see you from this very strange angle.
So I know you also have the state presentation. presentation, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible and leave time for questions, and then leave time for the state presentation as well. So this has been quite a year. A lot has happened. As Peyton said, I'll go back to really quickly. It's not on the slide, but FY 2025 appropriations. Congress was not able to pass any of the 12 annual appropriations bills in regular order. So for the first time in some time, we had a year-long continuing resolution, which at the most basic level funds everything at the previous year's levels. What that means for programs the city cares about, and some of those are listed here, that's not exhaustive, but CDBG, home, and pretty much everything else is they are funded in this fiscal year at the level they were funded in FY 2024. And as Peyton said, one result of a continuing resolution is that community project funding / congressionally directed spending, that those are the House and Senate terms for it, what we all call earmarks. There were no earmarks in FY 2025. So they came back in FY 2022 after a hiatus of over a decade. And the city, and there's a future slide on that, but the city has done reasonably well, but there were no earmarks for anybody in FY 2025. Just to be clear, I've had one or two clients say, well, Congressman so-and-so wasn't able to get earmarks, and nobody was able to get earmarks. So that's not unique to any single member of Congress or senator. So I think the biggest thing that happened, and if you told me I could summarize the budget reconciliation along 4 bullets, I wouldn't believe you, but I aim here just to kind of cover the most important items in what's really a massive budget reconciliation bill. And these are the 4 main bullet points of interest to local governments. It repeals almost all of the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax incentives. Those are phased out pretty quickly. And I think what's a win, 2 wins, is it makes opportunity zones permanent and allows the governor to do designations of opportunity zones every 10 years, with the next designations coming next year. It permanently extends the new markets tax credit, and then it increases the state and local tax, the cap on the state and local tax deduction from $10,000 to $40,000. And just a couple of other items that are in the budget reconciliation bill that's important. You may remember the House passed version, the original House version of the bill would have preempted all state and local regulation of artificial intelligence. That was not in the final bill. The expanded low-income housing tax credit is made permanent. It includes a $625 million appropriation for security for World Cup host cities. And I think for Columbia, the question is does that include base camp cities? And I think we would like the answer to that to be yes. And then not directly to the city, but for the airport, it includes $12 billion to improve air traffic control. So those are the items of interest, direct interest to local governments in the budget reconciliation law. I think as you've all read in the news, there's certainly a lot more than that in the budget reconciliation law, and I can answer some questions about that. But we've also provided a handout that's kind of a 1.25 page summary that I think you should all have on the budget reconciliation law.
It's in your packets.
Back here. And then on FY 2026 appropriations, we went into the August recess. Kind of interesting. Historically, the House has been way ahead of the Senate, and in recent years has actually even passed all 12 appropriations bills before going into the August recess. They had a goal of doing that this year. They didn't meet that goal, but they still passed most of the appropriations bills either at the floor or through committee. In recent years, the Senate hasn't really done anything before the August recess, and this year the Senate Appropriations Committee has approved most of its FY 2026 appropriations bills. So when the House and Senate come back from their recess. The fiscal year ends on September 30th. And if history is any guide, and I think even more so this year, they are not going to finish work on FY 2026 appropriations by October 1st. And there's already talk has started already about will there be a government shutdown? Will they do a short-term continuing resolution? I think anybody who tells you they know what the end game is for FY 2026 appropriations isn't telling the truth. So we'll just really have to see what happens. I think for the city, the main programs are always CDBG and home. Both the House and Senate appropriations bills would fund CDBG at last year's level. I think in the current climate, that's a big win. On the home program, the Senate would fund it at last year's level. The House would zero it out. So I think our main priority as we head into the fall and as Congress wraps up or continues to work on FY 2026 appropriations bill is keeping that number for CDBG and getting the Senate number for home. So I put BRIC in there because Columbia was one of the first cities. BRIC is a relatively new program, was created in 2017, and Columbia was one of the first cities to get a BRIC grant. The administration in its early days made a move to rescind unobligated BRIC grants. Fortunately, Columbia's grant was obligated and we were spared. And I think in a sign of where the BRIC program is, the House Appropriations Committee included pretty strong language telling the administration, and the key word there is not, is shall. The administration shall use no less than 3% and no more than 6% of money appropriated to the Disaster Relief Fund for the BRIC and its sister program, the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. So that's a pretty strong sign of bipartisan support for BRIC and FAA and pre-disaster mitigation in general. Really quickly on FY 2026 appropriations, I don't want to go blow by blow. One of your handouts is our funding chart. And that goes department by department and says, here's what was funded last year, here's what the administration proposed, here's what's in the House bill, here's what's in the Senate bills. That kind of gives you a guide of where things are going. As I said, it looks like CDBG will likely in the end be funded at last year's level. Home, we'd like to keep the higher Senate number. I will say it's if you look at the appropriations bills, both House and Senate, the House is much more austere than the Senate. The Senate pretty much funds everything at last year's level or even small increases. The House does include a lot of cuts, but I think it's interesting to see that on the administration's biggest proposals, particularly at HUD. At HUD, the administration was proposing, and this is a big proposal. They were proposing to combine public housing, Section 8, Section 202, and Section 811 into a single state block grant and cut the funding for those combined by about 42%. Both the House and Senate said, we think we'll just go with the current programs and fund most of those at last year's level or a little bit higher, particularly on Section 8. Similarly, at the Department of Labor, the administration wanted to combine all of the job training programs into a single employment and training block grant to the state with less funding, and both the House and Senate have demurred on that idea and just kind of fund the traditional adult job training block grant, youth job training block grant. So that's where FY 2026 appropriations stand. As Peyton said, we did submit earmark requests. They were the same as last year's earmark requests. And I know this sounds crazy to say, it's only late August, but now is the time to start thinking about our FY, even though we don't know what the end game is for FY 2026, we don't know what's going to happen. Now is the time to be thinking about the city's FY 2027 appropriations requests. I know that sounds, I'm kind of, it's hard for me to absorb that, but it is late August and really we need to be ready with our requests by mid to late January of next year. So we're we're ready to go, and ideally even be talking with Senator Graham's office and Representative Clyburn's office about what some of the city's requests for FY 2027 might be. Really quickly on appropriations, I want to mention, you all likely heard in the news, Congress approved a rescissions bill right before the August recess. That was the first rescissions bill to be enacted since the Clinton administration. So that was not something that's then, and a rescissions bill is under the Budget Act. I'll try not to get into the weeds, but under the Budget Act, the president can propose a rescission of previously appropriated funding, and Congress has I think 40 days to act on that, and there's certain procedures that they have to follow. And so the rescissions bill that became law that passed the House and Senate was mostly focused on eliminating funding for NPR and PBS, and essentially codifying the cuts to USAID and other foreign aid programs that were implemented by DOGE. So nothing of direct impact on local governments around the city of Columbia. But looking ahead, the director of OMB, Russ Vaught, has said he would like to pursue more rescissions bills, including possibly pursuing what they call a pocket rescission. And under a pocket rescission, if the president proposes a rescissions bill in Congress within, I think, a month of the end of the fiscal year and Congress doesn't act on it, it becomes law. That I don't think that's ever happened. It'll be an interesting test case. As you might imagine, Mr. Vaught's proposal for more rescissions bills was not met with particular joy on Capitol Hill. Certainly not from Democrats, and even among Republicans, there was a certain amount of trepidation about more rescissions bills. But I don't know that means there won't be any more rescissions bills. So we'll have to track that. I know I covered a lot on budget reconciliation and appropriations. Any questions on those two?
Any questions for me, Ryan? Keep going, Ralph.
Okay, I wanted these two housing. This is kind of came as a bit of a surprise. The House Financial Services Committee, the chair and ranking member of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, Mike Flood of Nebraska, Emmanuel Cleaver from Kansas City, Missouri, Republican and Democrat chairman and ranking member, I think in April or May sent out a letter to stakeholders and said, hey, we're looking at reauthorizing CDBG and home, and we'd like stakeholders to provide us with some feedback on what changes you'd like to see to CDBG and home. That really came out of nowhere. And just to put that into context, the last time Congress reauthorized CDBG and home was in 1992. So it's been 33 years since Congress has reauthorized CDBG and home. To put it in context, I like to joke, the 1992 bill was called the Cranston-Gonzalez Housing Act. And I don't think anyone under the age of 35 remembers who Alan Cranston and Charlie Gonzalez were. They were big names in their time, but that was a long time ago. But anyway, so Chair Flood and Ranking Member Cleaver, they started this process on home and CDBG authorization. They took stakeholder input. They followed that up with some direct visits with stakeholders in June. Deborah Kennedy and I took part in one of those. It was an interesting process. And then Flood and Cleaver came out with a home reauthorization discussion draft and held a hearing on it right before the August recess. We have a summary of the various housing provisions, including the House home reauthorization discussion draft. It makes a lot of, I think, what the city would view as positive changes to the home program, provides more flexibility in how to use the funds, provides the ability to help what they call workforce income families, which is households up to 100% of median household income, and just a lot of other changes, increasing the number of units that are exempt from Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements, projects that are up to 50 units rather than 12 would be exempt from those, and just a bunch of other changes that would make it easier for the city to administer the home program. I think that that's something that could possibly move this fall, and we're eagerly waiting. Flood and Cleaver said that they will follow up later this year with a discussion draft on CDBG reauthorization and have similar stakeholder meetings to kind of flesh that out. So that's interesting, surprising, and I think good news. It's interesting that they're pursuing home reauthorization at the same time the Appropriations Committee would zero out the program, but nevertheless, that's something that was really not expected, and I think a sign that there's bipartisan recognition about the need to address housing. And then right before the August recess, and this is much bigger than the House bill, Senator Scott, who's chair of the Banking Committee, and Elizabeth Warren, who's the ranking member, released, and then the Senate Banking Committee unanimously approved the Road to Housing Act, and that is a major piece of housing legislation. Again, one of our handouts has a summary of that bill. We just talked about the home reauthorization discussion draft. Home reauthorization is included in that bill, but that's just one piece of the bill. It includes some new programs, some changes to CDBG, improvements to CDBG disaster recovery, including creating an office at HUD specifically dedicated to the CDBG disaster recovery program, and incentive programs to encourage cities to build more housing, for lack of a better way of putting it. So that was actually marked up right before the recess, and that's something. There's not many things that are approved 27-0 in committee these days. So that's certainly something we need to keep a track of. And then also on the issue of housing, this is kind of fallen out of the news, but last month the president put out an executive order on homelessness, which is, it's difficult to explain. I mean, executive orders are really, they're not law. They're instructions to federal agencies. So you take them for what they're worth. But nevertheless, I think the most important, and I'll give you an example. It instructs the Attorney General to take appropriate action to seek the reversal of federal or state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the administration's policy of encouraging the forced civil commitment of people with mental illness who pose a danger to themselves or other people or are homeless and cannot care for themselves. Now, whatever you think of that, taking appropriate action to seek the reversal of federal state judicial precedents or to terminate consent decrees is not something that happens at the flip of a switch or even in a few weeks. So that's certainly not to minimize what that instruction to the Attorney General means, but that's not going to happen overnight. Similarly, it instructs HHS to make changes to discretionary substance abuse programs. Most substance abuse programs are formula to the state, so that's limited. But I think the most immediate impact of the executive order, and this is one that will have almost an immediate impact on FY 2025, is it instructs the Secretary of HUD to make changes to discretionary homeless assistance programs, which means essentially all homeless assistance programs, and particularly the continuum of care program. So in your next and in future continuum of care applications, you're likely going to have to make some pretty major changes to your continuum of care program and your homeless assistance programs. What those look like and how that happens remains to be seen, but that's something that HUD can do almost immediately. And the big thing is it ends any support for Housing First. So the Housing First approach, which I think has been around
Long time.
yeah, long enough that I can't remember when they started Housing First. That is now gone. So I think any successful continuum of care application is not going to take a Housing First approach or include those words in its application.
So Ralph, do you think that there's an opportunity to go back to some of our priorities around potentially, having a direct allocation to Columbia for the continuum of care?
Potentially, clearly, what they're saying in that instruction to the Secretary of HUD is make big changes to the continuum of care program. So that could certainly provide an opening for that. And then, I'm not going to go through all of the executive orders. There've been so many, and, I'd be lying if I told you I remembered every one of them. But I will-
Disappointed, Ralph. You
I-
should know them off the tip of your tongue.
I'm sorry?
You should know those off the tip of your tongue.
Well, I do want to highlight one. It's not an executive order, but it's a memo from USDOT to state DOTs. And it says, hey, state DOTs, work with your MPOs to identify the most dangerous arterial roads, and report back to us on what those are. So I think that's an opportunity for the city and the MPO to work with SCDOT, as SCDOT prepares to report back to DOT on that. And that could pave the way, for some federal assistance in the future. I think that's an interesting one, for sure.
Hey, Ralph, let me ask you something real quick, sir. Back to the homeless, HUD. What's the best path for us to be aggressive on shaping what a ask would look like? What a program that we think locally could be successful, not just for the municipality, but kind of for the region?
I think continuing what we were doing in the last administration, meeting with HUD and saying, hey, we'd like to make some changes to our continuum of care. The status quo, we don't think the status quo is working for us.
Is it a function of just drafting up a proposal of what we locally think is effective?
The struggle with the continuum care problem, though, is that it's 13 counties, it's only 3.9 million, and 2 million of it's going directed to supportive housing. So I don't know where, unless they put more money in it, which they've talked about, but they haven't yet, I don't know what we do.
It's a tough one.
Because we have to spend money, the continuum has to spend money, not just here. So that's the problem is it just, there's, if you take that funding, then you've just killed the supportive housing, which we need. Those folks are already there. We don't need any more folks on the street. We gotta figure a different avenue to go with, I think. And we gotta be creative. And I think, but I don't discourage us continuing to interact with HUD.
The challenge is when the continuum of care program was created, South Carolina divided the state into huge chunks of counties. So unlike most cities your size, you don't have, most cities the size of Columbia have a continuum of care that covers the city and its immediate suburbs. So in another state, your continuum of care would be City of Columbia, Richland County, and Lexington County. And so our challenge is how do we get that designated, and how do we set that up? I was open to it in the last administration, but and I think they would still be open to it, but it certainly will. It's something we would have to sell and work at.
Proposal together.
Yeah, I
Go
think-
sell it.
The only way you know the answer is to ask the question,
So you gonna put that together for us, Ralph?
I think that's somebody who has some expertise in setting up
At
a
least
continuum of care.
show us the path and we'll produce it and then we'll come visit you.
Sure.
I can re-up a memo I did previously on kind of what the process is for doing that.
Okay.
It's a Secretary of HUD, designating a new COC is a Secretary of HUD decision. The statute is pretty silent on that, other than Secretary of HUD may designate a continuum of care.
Are there other departments that we could go with the same plan? Commerce with the workforce development approach.
So your workforce development board is regional, if I'm correct, right?
Through the cog, yeah, I think regionally they are. Yeah.
So, so I'm not sure that the Department of Labor would be eager. The Department of Labor generally encourages, regional approaches to, and the Department of Labor encourages what you all have. What they don't want is for the city of Columbia to have a workforce development board and for Lexington County to have a workforce
Gotcha,
development board and
understood.
for Richland County to have one.
Yeah.
They like the regional approach.
Gotcha, thanks.
And we always have to be careful every time they do a workforce development bill. There's always moves to just get rid of local workforce investment boards and just give all the money to the state. So that's something we always have to be cautious about.
So AC and Benjamin, maybe we could follow up. I know you had sent us a bunch of materials when we did our visit a couple years ago, Ralph. If we can re-up that, then maybe we can have staff put together a proposal of you're saying direct allocation, will, right? A direct allocation to the city
I
is
think
what we're
so, yeah.
advocating for.
Some path forward, yeah.
I can do that, of course.
Yeah, we'll get what Ralph sent, put something together.
And then, this is a pretty self-explanatory slide. Just some recent grant awards. The city received $80,000 to update its action plan from the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. And then the big one that you all worked so hard on, the $204 million for the Assembly Street Railroad Grade Separation Project. Which, knock on wood, we should be hearing from DOT soon on
That's
signing that grant agreement. And then pending is FY 2025 Safe Streets and Roads for All. And just on that Safe Streets and Roads for All program, that's a 6-year program authorized in the last bill. So there will be an FY 2026 round of Safe Streets and Roads for All as well for an application last year. And as we look at reauthorization of surface transportation programs, and I'll talk briefly about that, I think the Safe Streets and Roads for All program is one. Keeping that program and keeping it robustly funded is a priority, should be a priority for the city. And then really quickly on community project funding on the next slide. I mentioned this is what your delegation, your delegation, Senator Graham, has secured for the city since community project funding came back. And I'll point you to that third bullet. Most community project funding, congressionally directed spending is, the first two are pretty typical, 709,000, 575,000, million, 2 million, a lot of 100 and 200,000s. $10 million for Assembly Street is, that's a big earmark and from Senator Graham. I don't think we can say thank you for that one enough. And really going back to the rail crossing elimination grant, just your delegation was so supportive. We really can't thank them enough for everything they did to support that application. It was a long process and they were stalwart supporters. And then just really quickly looking ahead, the PowerPoint said the next 100 days. So I tried to keep it. I mentioned really when Congress comes back next month, FY 2026 appropriations bills is going to be what they really focus on. The fiscal year ends on September 30th. They're not going to finish work on it before September 30th, or unlikely, but they'll still be negotiating. There's talk of a second reconciliation bill. I put a question mark there because, I mean, really after the passage of the first reconciliation law, I mean, Congress is, I think Congress was exhausted. They barely made it to the August recess. So we'll see. There's certainly talk of a second reconciliation bill. as I mentioned earlier, the director of OMB wants to pursue additional rescissions bills. We'll see if the administration pursues that. The housing bills, I don't think those become law, but I think they certainly continue to discuss them and move them. And if the Senate leadership has the desire and the floor time, they might even bring the Scott Warren bill to the floor. And then surface transportation reauthorization, I don't put a question mark on that because Congress is going to continue to work on that. The current law expires at the end of FY 2026, so September 30th, 2026. But the work has already started on that. That both the House Transportation Committee and the various Senate committees with jurisdiction over that bill have held hearings. They're taking stakeholder input. I've taken part in some of the stakeholder input sessions with the House Transportation Committee and with the Senate Commerce Committee. USDOT put out a request for information saying, what do you think should be in the next reauthorization bill? So the administration is currently putting together a reauthorization proposal. The city is responding to that. We've drafted a response to that RFI. So certainly surface transportation reauthorization isn't going to be completed in the next 100 days, but a lot of work is going to continue to happen on it. And they'll start to move a bill maybe late this fall, more likely next year. They might not get it done in time. If history's any guide, they'll do some short-term extensions. But I think the work they do this year and next year will lay the groundwork for whatever does become law in the end. And I think with that's, I hope I haven't taken too much time, I'm sorry, but if there's any questions, happy to answer any questions.
Any further questions? I mean, Ralph, like everybody, I mean, the next 100 days could be totally different. We don't know. I mean, the uncertainty around everything, and I think that's, second bill coming. I don't know. I don't know that Congress has the stomach. But we also don't know where the pressure points are coming. So, I mean, it's probably more important now that we really keep our finger on the pulse as things change. But I do think there's opportunity, as we've had discussions with the folks at Intergovernmental at the White House about, housing is the biggest issue. Work with us on deregulating HUD, getting those funds that we can actually show them how they can be productive, but also at the same time putting some guardrails and expectations on it. I do think there's some opportunities there. We just got to figure out the opportunities that we can participate in to make it better for the future. But it's hard to do that too when things are changing so rapidly. And as you said, I mean, these executive orders aren't law, but they basically direct these agencies to follow that path. So that makes a struggle as well because you spend a lot of time trying to understand the intent of some of these orders. But I think we got to keep pushing forward. But I do think there's opportunity for us to put some things forth and see what happens. Especially when it comes to homelessness and housing and others. I think we have some opportunity to have some input and hopefully opportunities to be creative to get some funding to help us address the issues.
There are always opportunities, and and Mayor, I'm glad you mentioned the executive orders because, as I said, it's really interesting. The states get a lot of formula funding from the federal government, and the federal government has limited leverage with that money. It goes to the states, and the states, obviously within the confines of federal law, but they spend the money. Whereas a lot of what local governments get is discretionary grants, competitive grants, and so really the administration has a lot of leverage over those grant programs.
And that's where we're gonna have to keep our finger on it, and we've said that all along. I mean, today, so much of it is all grant, and so the only way we'll get that is to pursue it and use our resources correctly. So,
Excellent.
anything else for Ralph or Deborah?
No, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you so much.
for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle? and team.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, of the committee. I want to begin, as we always do, by thanking our good team that we work with at the city, Ms. Benjamin, Ms. Bucknight, and of course, Ms. Wilson. And I'm up here on behalf of Damon Jeter and Caroline Delaney and myself. We work together as a team at the State House. Before I jump into this, let me just say, as a commentary on everything, because this is like the year of no earmarks, of the year of no at the federal level and the state level. And we do a lot of work at the state level, but my gosh, this year for Ralph, and I know he's off the screen, the number of Friday nights and Saturday nights that those guys have been in there until 4 or 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and Ralph's weekly report is delayed, and he's there putting that thing together in the first 6 months of this new administration has just been like, wow. We work hard down here. The legislature, we work way too much. We don't stay up Friday nights until 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. He has had one heck of a year. They served their August break. So as a general overview, just to kind of, set the stage for everything before we jump into the way too wordy PowerPoint that you have in front of you. What do we do? We kind of work the same thing like at the federal level. We work on kind of an annual rhythm, an annual set of things that we do. And we meet with we start that by meeting with our delegation. We have a lot of people in the City of Columbia delegation in the House and in the Senate. We meet with them. We talk to them about the city's budget priorities and the city's policy priorities. And then we work with the city staff and when in those meetings, we also hear their priorities. And so we work with them to put together, so that we work well together, that they're representing us and we're helping them. And that builds a relationship with our delegation. We work with the city staff to provide supporting documentation for budget and policy requests. And we get very good support from all of the city manager's office and all the ACMs and the general counsel's office for backup that we need, and I should say CPD, backup that we need to have these discussions at the state level. We also respond to legislators' concerns when they come to us and say, here's something that I've got an issue with the City of Columbia, or I've got a constituent who's got an issue with the City of Columbia. We work with legislators in that manner. We monitor the bills. As you know, there's a couple of thousand bills that are introduced every year. There's only a handful of them that go forward and that are considered for passing into law. We watch those policy issues, and when ones come up like they did this year that would adversely impact the City of Columbia's interests, we are there again, working with the city staff to get background to see what our perspectives are, how we can interact with the legislators to make sure that we guard and protect the city's interests and advance the city's interests in other times, in other occasions. We report back to the city on all things state policy. We're there to track down information, find information. All three of us often get calls from legislators or from staff at agencies asking about things with regard to the City of Columbia. We work with the city on that in that manner. So it's an ongoing fluid relationship with our delegation and with other leaders, the leadership in the House and the Senate, the governor's office. And I think we work well with the team as a team. I would say that this year, obviously, the most disappointing thing is that we went through all of this entire process that we go through every year, including preparing our budget requests and preparing the paperwork for them and getting that to the members and having them submitted. And that makes me remember that I neglected to mention Peyton Lang, who lifts heavily for our team. And when I mentioned everyone else on the team, Peyton, who did just a yeoman's amount of work, especially on our budget priorities, supplied us with everything that we needed. We take that to the members, and with 3 weeks left in the session, maybe it was 4, that part of the session becomes a blur. The chairman of the Senate Finance Committee announced that there would be no earmarks, no local projects, no funding. The House agreed, and all of the projects that we had submitted, we actually had all of the projects except for one on our list this year. We had a commitment from legislator or legislators, some of them had 2 or 3 names on them, to request those funds, and those requests had been put in to the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, and they all just sort of evaporated with the announcement by the Senate and the agreement by the House. The governor followed that up with an executive order this summer, which directed all of his state offices to report back to him if there was anything in the budget passed by the legislature that was a pass-through, which was money that would come through their office and be passed through to someone like the City of Columbia or any other local government or third-party organization. And because he wanted to make sure that there were not any hidden earmarks in the budget that was passed after they took the earmark section out of the budget. So we sort of have a second protection, if you will, on against there being, I shouldn't say protection, because we would have preferred that there be earmarks, but they're not only did they not have earmarks, then they had a government executive order that said, if you see anything that looks like one, let me know so that we can work to make sure that doesn't get funded. So that's what we were left with. That is the 2025, the year of no federal earmarks, the year of no state earmarks. However, there were a number of things that got done that affect the City of Columbia and of interest to our citizens. Let's start by running through these. I'm going to go through these quickly, and you guys ask questions because I don't want to bore you by talking way too much on these things, which I am prone to do. So the texting while driving law was passed, applies statewide September 1st. I saw my first sign at an interstate entrance the other day at exit 18 on I-20. I said, there it is. That's the sign that I've read about right there in person on the entrance ramp. DOT put them at all the entrance ramps to all the interstates, entrance points across the state. Liquor liability tort reform. This is the bill that the mayor has been active on in terms of advocating for changes that will hopefully see reductions in insurance costs for some of our eating and entertainment venues. And we can't mandate those prices of those policies, but we're going to wait to see if this action that was taken, which was a grinding to get done between the insurance companies and the trial lawyers bar and other interests, the Hospitality Association, to get to this reform, it hopefully will be a step in the direction that everyone wants to see.
When's that digital ID system stuff going into effect? Is that now?
Texting while driving or the digital ID?
The last line bill mandates forensic age ID systems after midnight.
I believe this whole bill goes into effect on January 1st, 2026, to give venues the ability to take steps to implement this. It was not almost positive, it wasn't upon signature of governor or 30 days or 60 days. The Energy Security Act was a comprehensive piece of legislation that was passed, again, with a lot of debate and a lot of opinions on many sides.
Before you go, so do you anticipate that they will be revisiting liquor liability?
No time soon.
So it's closed?
I think that if you ask that question, I think what the leadership would say is, we went through a great wailing and gnashing of teeth and a lot of difficulty to get this bill. We have to give it a few years to see if it works. If it works, meaning if there's any real big gaps in what happens to victims of drunk driving, that was a problem. We didn't mean to cause that. If a gap meaning, wow, we did this, but the insurance, we did not get any more insurers who entered the markets and the premiums didn't come down noticeably. That's a gap. It didn't work. We got to give it time to see if the market works through the changes in the bill. They can come back to it, but I don't think they're going to come back to it next year.
I just want to add, they probably will address tort reform. So there is a possibility
Okay.
that they could talk about because they are gonna address tort,
Because this bill did not address tort reform at all.
not in full capacity.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Help me out. I need all the help I can get.
And the effective date is January 1, 2026.
There we go. Thank you,
They
Carolyn.
said that in the future identification systems, they left out stadiums, coliseums, universities, and others.
SC Energy Security Act, touched on that. That is a bill that is meant to address the need for more electricity generating in the state. It is another comprehensive bill that passed this year. I was talking to Mr. Shealy about this earlier. The Underground Facility Damage Prevention Act gives local governments the ability to take a little bit stronger action and to put some teeth into their laws around utility digging and other actions happening on the property. This is all spurred by the issues across the state with the massive amount of work that's going on with broadband rollout and fiber optic that's being laid and AI and 5G and. And there have just been a lot of issues where people thought that the law needed to be modified. And so this was actually passed into law. Golf cart operations. I bring up the golf cart operations, we put that in here. It's like the perpetual issue at the State House. There's always a golf cart bill somewhere, somehow. But this is an issue that our city council has discussed as well. You guys have been grappling with this. And the state law was modified really to allow cities to enact golf cart ordinances as long as they stay inside of these parameters. And so we're more than happy to supply, more chapter and verse on this. I was trying to write a PowerPoint that ended up being too long anyway. And so I was just giving the very high points of the
Just to be
legislation.
clear, we may now stipulate hours, methods, and locations. That's what I read there.
As long as you don't allow a golf cart to be on a highway over 35 miles an hour, or a highway that has cities can't allow a golf cart to be on a highway that has a 40 mile an hour speed zone, in a 40 mile an hour speed zone. So, and if you don't pass an ordinance on golf carts, the very last sentence addresses something I know the city council was talking about, which is they can only be operated within 4 miles of the address of the registration certificate of the golf cart.
Used to only be 2.
I'm sorry?
Used to only be 2.
It's now 4. Okay, I did not know that there was a 2 in the past
So,
that
but
applied.
So,
the root of it was the licensing and the,
well, I think for us, there's 2 things. It says methods. Well, the commercialization is a method, right? So I think we need to have a discussion with the university and others about the operations, and we need to put some parameters. We're gonna allow, continue to people come in and bring golf carts from all over the state during football games and other stuff. There has to be some regulations around it, and I think we're gonna have to be able to enforce that, how many people are on it? You can't put 20 people on a golf cart.
absolutely.
You can't just weave in and out of traffic. I think getting the locations, I don't think that we are, if we're having the commercialization with as a method, I don't think it should just be allowed.
But wasn't the root of it that golf carts weren't recognized as a vehicle for hire or something like that? Do you think that is taken care of with what they just passed? I understand what you're saying, the method, the commercialization of it. But, you think that's what they had in mind, that we locally, we're kind of unique.
Well, I'm looking at it going, if hours and method, well, what was the definition of method otherwise? Right? It's intended use is what it's the way I'm reading it, but, it doesn't say that we can't. And so I do think we need to sit down with these potential operators. It doesn't address, and it doesn't say that we can't require them to have a business license and be registered.
Proof of insurance.
The only thing it's saying, and the way I read that, is that, if somebody takes their golf cart to the football game and it's their own, as long as they're within the designated areas and they don't go on a primary highway, which, you know, the Ray Street is a primary highway. So is Garner's Ferry and so are and so I do think we need to take a look at this again.
Yeah, I mean, TK, can we ask you to take a look at that?
To see what the bill allows us to now do that we may not have had the leverage to do or the leeway to do in the past. Next
Oh,
slide.
when does this one go into effect? Because this directly affects some of the opioid work that we're doing in terms of consolidation of departments, the behavioral health, developmental disabilities, S2. Has this already gone into effect?
I'm going to call on a lifeline. It either went into effect the beginning of this budget year or the beginning of the next budget year.
Okay.
There could be a one-year transition because I think that there was a one-year transition with DES and Department of Health coming out of DHEC. So I'm not sure if there's a one-year transition on this one. This is one, of course, that you remember. This is the continuation, the final chapter sort of
Right.
the breakup of DHEC. And so they could not get this one done in round one, and which was really round two by the time they got it done. And so then this year they came back and addressed the Department of Mental Health. So we get a new DBHDD, Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. I'll move on and we'll get the answer to that in just a second. The EV charging stations was another statewide legislation that passed. And this was really, I think, out of concern for, it wasn't, I don't think it was really targeted at all the cities, but they wanted to make sure that before private interest invest money in charging stations across the state, that they weren't going to face some competition from local governments that may be able to subsidize a charging station. Particularly in South Carolina, we have what have been referred to in the past called the 10 towns that own their share of the Duke Power Station in the upstate, and they have their own electric utilities. And they wanted to make sure that those electric utilities didn't undercut, those municipal electric utilities didn't undercut private sector interest. And if I have anything wrong on that, or that I left out, Caroline Delaney will probably supplement it because I think she was up on that charging station bill that passed. Vetoed by the governor. This was of somewhat interest to us. It was vetoed the bill that would have allowed for, it was a local bill, and would have allowed for the little robots that carry the pizzas over on the campus to operate in Richland County as a kind of pilot program in Richland. Governor always vetoes local bills with the exception of school district bills and a couple of others, and vetoed this one, not saying that he was against the whole concept, just saying, I don't know why we wouldn't allow this statewide. So I'm sure that legislation will be back in the coming year. So those are kind of the highlights of the bills that passed into law that have some that have been discussed by the city, have an impact on the city, that are notable for the city. And if there are others that we missed, I hope you'll let me know. Let's go on to the budget, and we will go through the parts of the budget that we paid particular attention to working with city staff this year. The juvenile detention expenditures, this is an additional charge. And this, when it was first written, was really a lot higher than it ended up being. We expressed City of Columbia's real concern with how high it was. It was not $125 per day, it was $250 per day with no limit. And so that could have gotten very expensive very quickly for the juveniles that we take to DJJ. This kind of emanates from the fact that some local governments, I know Greenville and I think Charleston have closed their juvenile facilities, and so they're sending those juveniles to Columbia, and they close them for budget reasons in those counties, and that is putting a strain on an agency that really doesn't have the capacity to endure more strain. And so there was recognition by the legislature that the local governments that do send, and this is counties and cities that send juveniles to DJJ for confinement will have to cover an additional cost. They're already being charged $50 per day, but an additional $125 limited to 25 days per juvenile for the capital expenditures that requires. Return to work provisos, nothing changed this year from last year. The provisos that were in there stayed. No new ones were put in. The two that were in there that are of particular concern for Chief Holbrook's PORS system, we put them in there. We put that in there to show it's still in there, but so they didn't take the ones that are there out, but they didn't add anything to give us any relief either. The next page where the budget highlights are, I'm going to just run through these real fast. The top one is the reduction in the income tax. The second one was already touched on by Ms. Lang. The retirees, that helps our budget by having that amount of money in there to help cover the cost of the increases. There's the alternative transport program. Wow, was that a close call? We had no money in the budget as of the beginning of April in the House or the Senate, and maybe the third week of March, but we kind of jumped into action with some people who had been working on this at the Department of Mental Health who had not been in the lobby for a while for help because they were attending to some things. And we ended up getting the same amount of money or more, I can't remember, as we had last year, $4.5 million. This takes the strain off of our officers to transport mental health patients for the Department of Mental Health, as we had been doing for years before this program was set up. $15 million in recurring dollars to RIA, which allows our city of Columbia to hopefully apply for some more grant funds. And then they also plopped $40 million into an Office of Resilience. The $40 million, the $15 million is just extra money to RIA in addition to the federal money they get. The $40 million was the Office of Resilience to cover what that office had spent that wasn't covered by federal funds after Helene, and then other smaller storms like the one in Orangeburg for the last year. $80 million to the Department of Commerce for the Locate SC program, which is used for recruitment to keep their funds full, and $12 million for Veterans Homes operating costs. And I know we have some veterans homes in the city, but don't.
What is Locate SC, just as a reminder?
Locate SC is the program that recruits large companies from out of state to invest in South Carolina, invest in Locate in South Carolina. Harry Lightsey's program, Secretary Lightsey. Looking ahead to the 2025 session, these are the issues that did not get resolved, that we were active on, had interest on, affect the city.
Can we enact as a city that requires the vaping products only that are registered with the FDA to be sold in the city?
Okay, because if the state regulates it, they're gonna.
Well, I hope they regulate it. That's what we've asked. I mean, I've testified 3 times about it, but, you know, if it's not gonna get done and it's gonna sit there, we need to take action because we're seeing the repercussions of it here.
Third time, didn't pass. Hemp-derived consumables. This bill was, these guys started into something that was more detailed, ended up on a 21 and under limit, and no sales within 1,000 feet of a school, daycare facility, or similar locations.
So,
This city, I know, has, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, I guess my question is that, when that comes up, is that gonna address the THC drinks? Because right now, it's completely unregulated. completely.
Hemp-derived consumables, yes. It will address the THC drinks.
Because right now, Family Dollar can sell it and they don't have to get a license to sell it, which is, to me, outside the three-tier system, number one. Number two, there's no control over it.
Yeah, and there's,
Separate item. That's different than the.
different than the drinks? Okay. So that may be like the gummies and the candies and the chocolate bars? Okay.
Drinks are. We know. Commerce too.
The fastest growing segment in alcohol, in that business, but it's completely, there's no regulation around it. Something we need to talk about. Is that easy access for young people underage.
Right. I don't think there's any laws around it right now in terms
There
of
isn't.
age
It's
restrictions.
the wild, wild west.
Speed safety cameras. There was a bill introduced. It did not go anywhere. There was a budget proviso that was put in, and it was ruled out of order because it was not related to, it was not, the way that it was worded, the way it was put in was not related to, sufficiently related in the Senate to a section of the budget, of the state budget.
Well, I hope we're gonna continue to try to press forward on it. I mean, other cities have adapted even the noise camera to deal with all these, vehicles that are driving out, which, since we don't have a license anymore, and remember, we had to go get the decal, you had to go get your car inspected. It's opened up the door, but, we're getting increasing complaints about these vehicles, and there's no way for our officer to enforce it the way it is saying, because they literally have to have that monitor and have to catch them. Well, there's no way they can do it if the car is driving. I mean, so there are cameras now that can capture it, and same thing as things, there's civil fines. And anyway, I hope that the state will give us the ability. I know that they say this is against privacy acts, but I do want to remind them that, especially those ones who are attorneys, seem to always want to use our cameras when it benefits their case. So I'm hoping that, we could have it. It would help us. I mean, there isn't a city in South Carolina that's still not trying to hire law enforcement. So if there are areas that we could use technology, so that our guys can stay doing what they need to do instead of worrying about speeders, red light cameras, and noise complaints, sure be nice.
Where did the group of active residential communities, how far did they get along with the red light case study? Because this time last year, y'all were in here, a lobbyist came in and talked about a citizens group putting together.
Everybody's waiting for us to write the first check for that third party.
So no
All the
lobbying.
cities who said they were in as long as we went first.
I didn't see anything significant. I'd have to go back and
No, I
call on my
don't
colleagues,
think,
but I think that the one bill that was introduced because we met with the legislator and asked her.
oh, really?
Senator Devine introduced that bill, right? Senator Devine said, I
He
believe,
introduced the red light?
she introduced the bill
Okay.
to allow that.
There,
She said, yeah, and that was after we met with her and then we supplied her with language. So I don't know what that other group might have done. I'm not saying they didn't do anything because I don't know.
So maybe checking in with her, how we can work with school districts, since he said Henry McMaster likes to see case studies, that work. Schools have to be involved usually to work with school districts on safety intersections and how red light cameras might give us
That's a
some
great
data to really work on.
Yes,
Get that forward.
yes. Could be a path forward. And there was a group that was working on that,
yes.
right?
And it's my understanding that the state, the number of legislators that didn't know that this was an issue now, or there are a couple that are coming on board,
Oh, good.
and are in support. So you probably will hear more about, work zone safety, school safety zones, and I think there's a third one that they're looking at. And so we may see someone.
Yeah, well, I mean, let us know if we can help, as local frustrated folks with, the enforcement thing, just as the mayor pointed to, I think would help out a lot with technology.
Same issue with litter fine increases. Bill was introduced. The bill was introduced. Two bills that were introduced. Both would have increased the penalties for dumping litter on private or public property. They didn't move forward. The key to those litter bills, from what I can tell, is in talking to people, is Palmetto Pride. And I can't remember what our Palmetto Pride conversations have been like, but Palmetto Pride, that is the program that works on picking up litter everywhere. I think they're more concerned with the lower level violations for littering, meaning throwing a bag of McDonald's out of your car. Nothing against McDonald's, I love them. But as opposed to what we've had more problems with, which is illegal dumping.
Well, no, both of them are a problem.
Yeah, they're both litter.
But to me, look, if you're gonna throw trash out, that means you've done it. Now, you just didn't do it the first time. You're continuing to do it because there's no penalty. You start writing some $1,000 tickets, people will quit.
Agreed.
I mean, that's part of our problem is that one person who throws that McDonald's bag out has a Big Mac box in it, a fry box in it, and a drink and all the napkins. And then when that guy from DOT drives over it with his tractor, it becomes 55,000 pieces across our city. No, I mean, it needs to be hard on anybody that litters. It doesn't matter if it's a candy wrapper or a dump.
And if you don't want the fine, then don't engage in the behavior. I don't know, that argument is hard. The whole point is to deter bad behavior, right? And if you
Right.
don't want to be fined, don't litter.
Right, and I don't want to speak for Palmetto Pride, but when we testified in favor of this bill 2 springs ago, when it was up in subcommittee 2 springs ago, and I mentioned the city subcommittee members, I told them the city of Columbia was in favor of this bill because of everything that everybody's told us. I got cornered by the Palmetto Pride people at the end of the meeting saying, we don't agree with that, we're against this bill.
Well, what is Palmetto Pride's mission? What's their function? They're there to give funding to pick up litter, is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Their rationale, and like I said, if I'm speaking for Palmetto Pride and I'm wrong, I hope somebody corrects me. Their rationale is, as I understand it, as they told me, is when you have $1,000 tickets, officers are reticent to write the ticket because they don't want to write a $1,000 ticket to someone. But if you have a $50 ticket, they see someone doing it, they'll write the $50 ticket much faster than they'll write the $1,000 ticket.
Problem
or even
is,
the $250.
$50 doesn't mean anything to anybody. That's part of the problem. Number 2, people aren't writing them. So, having the flexibility, and the officer's got a range. He can go up to $1,000, so he can write a $200 ticket. The point is that we need stiffer fines and stiffer penalties to stop. And if people know it's a fine, they may think twice about throwing it out.
And there's plenty of examples of other similar states that have fines that high and you see a decrease in litter. So I don't know if that argument really,
I know.
anything that we can do, I feel like, to help get this reintroduced, I think would be great, this legislative session. Because if we're gonna be putting all this money into quality of life and cleaning up our, roads and beautification, I mean, it can get ruined in just one day of people littering. And I always use Sunset Drive as an example. Every time volunteers go pick it up, the next day it's back to square one.
Yeah. That's.
And they're getting sidewalks soon, so that's just gonna make it even harder for pedestrians to be able to use the sidewalks that we've spent resources on.
Right, it's very frustrating. And dispiriting.
Can I ask one related to that? I know you had mentioned that MASC was working on, and I don't know if there's been any movement, but increasing municipal fines in general. I'm thinking, especially as we have some of these capital expenditures that are now legislated, is there any movement on being able to increase municipal fines? So it's not capped at 500, especially like for criminal offenses?
I have not heard that lately. Have you guys heard that? That might have,
Can you just check with them and see if
Yeah.
That's something they're still interested in pursuing?
They should be having their meeting soon, right?
Can you find out that? Increasing fines.
Right, they'll have their spring meetings, fall meetings. Limits on the extension of water and sewer systems. This is another one of those bills that came up. And it got legs because it was being pushed by some folks from the rural areas who were being made to tie onto water sewer systems that were being pushed down the middle of the highway out toward a subdivision. You know, the town is here, the 200 home subdivision is here, and I live in between, and they're putting the water and the sewer out there, and they're making me tie on, and it's costing me a lot of money, and I don't want to anyway. And so this bill came up. We talked to multiple people on the Ag Committee, and then I think they moved it over to the 3M Committee and had questions asked at subcommittee and did everything we could to try to make the bill better and, in essence, protect the city's interest on this bill. And you can see on there that Mr. Eskridge came and testified on behalf of the City of Columbia and others. As of now, the bill is still in the House. It hasn't gotten out of committee, but it's expected to come back up this next year. We're hopeful that that either it won't pass into law or that we can work out a reasonable compromise from where they started on the bill. The short-term rental and accommodations tax changes. I put this on here for obvious reasons, the City of Columbia's interests. This bill is being pushed by some folks down on the coast who have some concerns with how Airbnb and maybe one of the other platforms, Booking.com, administer their rentals and how they pay the local taxes. It would create a new position or a new title of accommodations intermediary, and it would basically put that onto those platforms, require them to be an intermediary, and then the intermediary comes with a set of rules and requirements that they have to do. The bill started out with a provision in it that would centralize all those tax payments through Department of Revenue, the local tax payments through the Department of Revenue, the same way that Ubers and Lyfts are. Those taxes go through the Department of Revenue and then are remitted to the local governments from which they came, from where the business came from. So it started out like that, but that part was taken out. And so it's on third reading in the House. It is expected to go over to the Senate on the second day of the session. And then the Senate will grapple with what they would like to do with the bill, modify and pass or not pass or leave it the way it is and pass. Probably won't stay exactly like it is. That bill, the way that it is written currently, would not have an impact on the City of Columbia's ordinance on short-term rentals. Nonprofit Housing Corporation tax exemption. Again, this is something that, this is actually the second year that we've dealt with this bill, maybe the third. This has to do with property taxes and the ability of some market rate, lower income rental properties, picture cheaper apartments in town, giving a small portion of their ownership to a nonprofit and then claiming a tax exemption. It's a loophole in a bill that was passed in 2020, a law that was passed and enacted in 2020. It's a loophole that the legislature is trying to close so that all the appropriate property taxes are paid, but there is a disagreement between the House and the Senate over how to close the loophole, so it's been stuck. Municipal election changes. Again, this is another bill that would not affect the way that the City of Columbia administers our elections. But when we see a bill like this, we immediately send it to Ms. Benjamin and Ms. Wilson, and they send it to our city clerk. And she gives us feedback and says, it's fine just like that, but if things start to move around, let me know. And so that bill is something that we have on, that we're watching. Cities cannot promote DEI. This was a big social conservative bill that was introduced at the beginning of the year to try to support the administration, the Trump administration's efforts on DEI. The bill got through the House, it was sent to the Senate, and it hasn't moved in the Senate Judiciary Committee. We will watch that for next year. It was, the bill's pretty, it's got some pretty onerous provisions in it with regard to local governments because of what it makes us do before we can spend a nickel with anybody. But we're hopeful. It's better than it was when it was first introduced, and we're hopeful that the Senate will make it better before they pass it. Or maybe if they can't make it better, that would take away the extra money that it would cost local governments to enforce it. Maybe we can figure out another method to get to what the administration wants to achieve. The last two issues, transfer of development rights and concurrency programs in local zoning. I wasn't sure if I'd kept these in or not. These are two different bills that address growth for cities that are having very difficult growth issues. And they are both, the first one has to do with transferring development rights. Second one has to do with a concurrency ordinance, which I don't think is that much of an issue for the city of Columbia, but it would give the city new zoning powers if we wanted them. If we had a concurrence issue, a concurrency ordinance, it allows cities to pass concurrency ordinance and then says what the parameters on that would be if the bill passes, if it went into law. The Lexington County has a concurrency ordinance right now, and it was in the news over the weekend. And this explains the issue pretty simply, that a developer wants to build a new subdivision. They send out a survey to Lexington One School District, to EMS, to Sheriff's Office, to all of the public service providers in the area. And they say, how would this new development projected development of 200 houses, how would this affect you? And if they get it back to where that they couldn't handle the growth, or the growth would cost them a lot of money, then it gives them grounds for rejecting or modifying the development. It's a way to manage growth by making sure that public services are not depleted too rapidly, that the governments don't go broke trying to keep up with growth and the costs associated with growth. Keeping an eye on those issues. I know the mayor had talked to a couple of organizations about one or two of those issues. So that is looking back at what happened, looking at what we do, and looking forward to the next year.
Any questions?
There's a watch list that's attached. You want to look at, there's a watch list attached to your documents if you want to look at any more. And then, Mayor, we do have a executive session, little item
Yeah.
on this agenda as well.
So, when pre-filing starts when?
I don't think the dates have been announced yet. There should be 2 dates in two dates in the House and 2 dates in the Senate typically. Right around Thanksgiving will be the first one in the House.
So by mid-December, we'll know what's pre-filed.
Right, and we'll have a pre-file report. But we're continuing all the bills, all these that we're working on. It's that year. It'll be, all the bills that are pre-filed will be in addition to what's in this report.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to enter an executive session for discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements pursuant to SC Code 3470A2, legislative affairs.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.